Rain, that was great. And Tom, I thought your speech this morning, your speech this morning was fantastic, and I'm very impressed by this. And Secretary of State, if you're still here, or your envoys who hopefully are, I was very impressed by your focus on driving profitability. You must have said that about 20 times. I started counting. No, I mean it. I was impressed by that. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about my business and then reflect on the challenging question, and then end with a proposal of where Tom and the Secretary of State could work together and isn't in this. So I'm a farmer's son from the Herefordshire-Gloucestershire border. And I'm proud to say that my father, at 87, it's a bit of a theme, is in the audience today. And his instruction is to live at least 5 more years. But to be safe, 10. My story, I think, is one of growth and investment, and like most in this room, of risk, and a bit of work, and great pleasure. So I started early in strawberries. This is my daughter. Sorry, I must remember to be able to look at the front. In fact, I planted 1 hectare of strawberries when they were still in the soil back in the day as my college thesis. I advertised in the Students' Union, rented a bus, got the students planting with lots of fun, slept in the field, drove the camper van down to Cardiff Market, came back, started picking at 6 in the morning, and then a week before my final exams, planted another 2 hectares. It must have been crazy, really, when you look back, all organised from a payphone. Anyway, over the next 10 years, I stretched the season with glass, grew some of the other berries, organics, failed at apricots, was attracted to cherries because I could see the difference that covering them from rain would make. And we've seen the UK cherry industry rise since. We now even have some wine grapes, because covering transforms them too. And that was stimulated by my mother. I then went to that wonderful country, South Africa, for the counter season. Planted 4 hectares, and 20 years later, we have about 3,000 people there working hard away. And it's wonderful to have created opportunities for all those people. We have mediclinics and all. Look at the characters. We hosted 52 from Hereford Agricultural Club there for a week in January. Joe Hilditch was one of them. And we sell more locally there in South Africa now than we do in the UK and also to the Middle East. My son is at uni there. I then went to the west coast of Portugal to grow raspberries and blackberries with its brilliant cool climate, the Atlantic breeze coming in, no frost. But interestingly now, it's short of water. Its sales all go into Europe through Driscoll, the same as the other farms. And then about 8 years ago, I couldn't resist the adventure and the potential economics of growing blueberries in China, in Yunnan, in the south, in the banana growing area. And recently cherries, that's on the right-hand side of the picture, at 2,400 meters. It's been a fascinating experience. They're all sold locally. And this is what the pickers wear there. So you'll notice that most of these photos are under tunnels. And it took me about 5 years to the age of 27 to work out that the cost of weather losses on a high-value crop were unacceptable. So failing to find any appropriate tunnels in the UK, I went down to Spain and imported some not very good ones from there. And I then spent the next few years making them stronger, higher, wider, put doors on the front that tractors could go in, vents in different places, roll vents up the side, automation, employed some engineers, chased them to come up with some patents, employed some salespeople, tested on the farm, and inspired by Apple, we launched new innovations every September with open days, and we sold in Kent and Essex, all across Scotland, around the country. And then I realised that bad weather wasn't just the preserve of the British, and our industry was a little ahead of some other countries. So we designed different versions for different crops and different latitudes. This is one that gives you better pollination and 20% extra free light when the weather's good. So tunnels sold far and wide. All over the place, really. It took me by great surprise, but it's been a roll. And we've now got them in Hawaii, we've got them in Patagonia, we've got them in all sorts of extreme places. We've got them over crocodiles, we've got them over tilapia, baby leaf salad, flowers. And here they are dotted around the planet. We find ourselves in 60 countries, not 150 like Richard, but 60 is enough, with staff in 10, and including having a go recently in India, where there's 1.4 billion people who haven't yet discovered blueberries. You got to have a go. And here are the farms. So we are, as the screen should say, for growers, by growers. And we're about half farming and half what we call growing systems. So what do I distill from this, from 38 years of work? Well, it's been a story of good fortune, being part of an industry that's rising and riding the wave, sort of hanging on almost, of real enjoyment of people and cultures, of constant innovation in the field, of youthful passion. You feel unstoppable in your 20s to 40s, before it gets a bit more complicated, of confidence from early travel, thank you Nuffield, of finding good people, of patience and loyalty, of being shown gaps and having a go, or helping customers fill them, and of defining success through a triple bottom line, causing us to go carbon neutral 5 years ago, reducing it as much as we can, and offsetting the balance, including flying fruit, and sticking to a constitution that was written over a glass of red wine in 20 minutes about 10 years ago. But investing for growth in UK agriculture is about the future, not the past. And I have a brutal truth to share. We've made no money in the UK for the last 2 years, and that's before the NI rises. In berries and cherries, we need a return price inflation of about 10% to stand still this year, and still there'll be no profit. So is UK agriculture investable? Really? Travelling a fair bit, I often find myself, or obviously find myself, looking from the outside at the UK, comparing it with other countries, and talking with others about it, who may not have such knowledge of all the local noise. And the conversation may go, or does go, something like this. So I'm now in China with agricultural investors. What do you think of investing in that island in the top left corner of Europe? Well, it's got a good legal system. The locals complain a bit about the government, but it seems to be led by a reasonable guy. It isn't quite as self-destructive as one of those democracies right now. You know, they seem to be having a last frightened chest beat as they retreat and we take over. And you're right, the scientists couldn't be clearer that the UK is in a better position than its neighbours. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Spain or Italy or Germany. Just look at it. Some of them are 4 to 5 degrees warmer in just 25 years. That's our investment horizon. And those guys are talking about 1.5 to 2. It's going to be a nightmare for them. Land prices are going to go up in the UK, aren't they? Yeah, my analyst found this. It's probably a bit of an undershoot, but the principle has to be logical. Land values will go up in the north, won't they, and down in the south. And he also points out that the food and drink trade around that 450 million population wealthy market, 20% of world GDP, is obviously going to change a lot. much more do you think the UK could export? Well, comparing to other nearby countries, it's exporting only half of Italy and Spain, and a third of Germany and France. And it imports more than any of them. But food and drink is the biggest manufacturing industry now in the UK, bigger than automobile and aviation put together. And so they clearly got the resource. Looks to me like they could add, what do you think, 25 billion? Maybe 50 billion in 25 years if they got their act together. My analyst says they're talking about this advantage, but they're not consciously strategizing it. Just think grass. Yeah. I gather there's a bit of a dichotomy, a gap between their current reality and that obvious future. It's not clear that they're going to get there. Yeah, my analyst pulled these things out. It makes it look pretty grim there. And the summary is low profit, low investment, and low growth. So basically, we can't get a short-term return. There's not much profit there, except when you take a price hike because of weather, like coffee or cocoa doubling in the last year. But we can't write a business plan based on weather spikes. Oh, so that's it, is it then? Got to look somewhere else. What's the fundamental problem? Well, it's the supermarket system there. The retailers, they're clever, and they've got their own label, more than anywhere else on the planet, and they compete on price. And that results in them driving down supply prices very effectively and importing where it's cheaper. You saw that in the import figures. The result is that even though the UK is a high-cost place, it's got some of the lowest cost food, amazingly, even lower cost than America. Ah, so that's a showstopper then, is it? Is there any solution? Well, I can see one. What's that? Well, with modern media, as the Russians have shown with TikTok, you can move the voter or the consumer a lot, very efficiently nowadays. So if a national organization ran a series of brilliant campaigns, sustained for over 5 years, to inspire British people to seek British food, retailers would have to procure it and stock it whenever they can, and it would change the supply-demand equation and bring profitability in, as that 60% that is currently grown in their country increases. That would make the industry one of the best places for us to invest in the world. It would attract young entrepreneurs, those unstoppable 20s to 40s. And if they come in, you really get growth moving. It would bridge the gap. It would raise export, as Europe and other places will need, and it would kickstart the engine. I mean, 10% of 31 billion of Farmgate sales is 3 billion. The industry's 148 billion. Ah, so who could do that? Well, their government has a very proactive Secretary of State for Agriculture at the moment who wants to drive profitability. And there's this impressive organization called the National Farmers Union. The NFU don't normally do this sort of thing because they focus on trying to educate government as to the complexities of their industry. But the world is changing fast. They have a budget of at least 8 million a year, and allocating just 500,000 of it, and government backing it with 500,000, could afford a brilliant national campaign. Really? 1 million a year? Yeah. I had a friend at a branding agency appropriately called Fresh Britain, put a teaser together, and it looks like this. Final word. We can and we need to, all of us together, make this future happen, but we've got to move the consumer. Thank you.